Hello, I'm Wally, and we're here to talk over the next hour almost about living, dying, grieving, and remembering. And we'll go through it fairly quickly, but in a way that we're not used to doing it. So uh, let's go through it and see if this is of interest uh, of how to look at these life events in something of a different way. So, what we're going to do is, thanks to Jennifer, we have a poem that's very appropriate to what we're going to talk about today. It's going to talk about our topic in one way, and we're going to talk about it in a different way. Um, but it's really comes down to the same thing. So there's a link to the poem in the chat. And I'm going to briefly read the poem because it's really quite good and quite appropriate to what we're talking about. So it's called Fear, actually, and fear is one of the main topics we're going to talk about by Khalil Gibran. And so this is reading this very brief poem. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. And that is a beautiful poem that speaks to what we're talking about. The river only saw itself in terms of itself. The river, what's where I came from and where I'm going and what's going to be, and only saw the ocean in front of it. And that's like in the things we're talking about. If we only look at dying and grieving and remembering separately, we have one feeling. But just like the river, realize, well, it is part of a bigger flow. And flowing from the river into the ocean is the way that the river can participate in this flow, then that's a completely different way of looking at it, which corresponds to how we're going to look at a completely different way of what we're talking about. And I'll take it one step further and say the river needs the ocean and the ocean needs the river. The river needs the ocean. As its water flows, it has to flow somewhere. And the ocean is a natural place for it to flow to. The ocean needs the river because the river brings water to keep the ocean full. So there's also a dynamic relationship between them, which is also important to what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to tell a bit of my own story. Actually, what I'm going to talk about today is based on exactly what happened to me. And I'll also say up front, what I'm going to talk about today, it's not like I started in the beginning and planned anything. All I did was flow because with dementia, my mind works less. I don't plan as much. I have more feelings, so I just flow with things more. So everything I'm going to talk about, it flowed. It came to me. I did not plan anything of what we're going to talk about. So I was living a long life, life as normally happens, uh, ups and downs and this and that and the other, but life was the basis of where I was and what I had in mind and where I was in general in my life. So then something happened And I went to a doctor and he did all his tests and stuff. And he came back with the word dementia. And the, the word dementia, I found extremely frightening, extremely scary. And actually, quite instantly, I went from being in life to being in death. Dementia. I was completely overwhelmed with the idea, with even thinking about it and thinking about it related to myself. I didn't even know what to do with myself, so things went black. I went from the white of life to the black of death, and I only had two words: death and dementia. That's where I was living. That's where I was being at that point. And it went along like that for a while, and and I really was closed in by death and dementia. And then I realized, wait a second, yes, death is where I'm at, but I'm also still living. I have life and I have death at the same time. So that was already a switch in the way I felt about myself and how I related to the world. And then that continued to flow, and I realized that living and dying were not just both in me, active in me, they were actually connected, they were interacting. By having dying so present in my life, my living became more immediate because it wasn't just I'm living alone, it's I'm living alone and dying is present, and that makes my living more immediate. And my living was making my dying more meaningful. Dying was now part of my reality. And and so it being there, uh, my living allowed me to give more meaning to my dying. And then I again flowing along, I felt it felt like a dance because they were interacting. I felt that like they were dancing a duet. And then I thought, okay, living and dying are in me, and they're dancing a duet. So where does that leave me? What is my role? And when I think of dancing and when I feel dancing, there's music. So my role is to make the music. So not that the music I'm going to make is going to necessarily change their dance. Living and dying are dancing their duet, and if I make music, perhaps it will change their duet or how they're dancing. But I'm also making music for myself, how I'm going to relate to this situation I'm in. So I put all that together and created a phrase that really has guided my how I'm living since then. And the phrase is, when living and dying dance a duet, what music will you play? And that's really become very central to my life, to how what I do and how I do and what I don't do. Living and dying are active in me, and they're dancing their duet, and it's flowing along, and so that's already the first part, the first time. And given the topic of this conversation, it wasn't like life then death, like I might have thought about it before. You go through, you have life, life ends, you die, and then you're in death. No, it's already starting to flow. Life and death are flowing, living and dying are flowing at the same time. But I'll be careful to say, and the way I feel and the way I've related to this is, if we say living is white and dying is black, we could use any colors. But if we say that, it's not like the white of living and the black of dying are mixing together in a sense to become gray. No, I feel living and I feel dying, but they stay themselves. The one stays one color, the other one stays the other color, and it keeps going like that. So they are dancing together, but that doesn't mean that they are flowing together. Uh, So it continued from there, but now um, dying has become more of my life, more than what it had been before, for sure, more present for me. So I'm living, but I'm also dying, and it occurred to me. Uh, I felt very much that other balances were changing, just like my feeling about living and dying. The balance between them was changing. Other balances were changing. I was thrown off of exactly the way I'd always been, and other things were happening. For example, because of my dementia, my thinking started going down quickly, and it's still going down. So the balance between thinking and feeling has changed already quite a bit. My thinking is going down, and the amount of my life which is done with feeling is going up, and I don't feel like it's switched places with one dominant versus the other. I feel like they've come into a good balance. But again, thinking and feeling are interacting. A lot of times I'll feel something and do something because I feel it, not because I think about it. And I learned very quickly to really pay attention to my feeling. So I had a feeling even at that point that I should make my tombstone. And that was a really strange feeling because I'm going to be cremated and I don't even need a tombstone. I, there won't be a tombstone. But again, I'd reached the point already that I pay attention to my feelings the way I would pay attention to my thinking. And it said to my feelings, create a tombstone. And the other thing that was happening is living and dying aren't, as we said, life, death, and I only think about my tombstone when I get close to death. They're flowing together. So I said, okay, I'm going to flow with this feeling. And so I started feeling about my tombstone, and it actually took several weeks. It wasn't just to think of it. It was not only what would be on a tombstone if I was going to have one, and well, what is my tombstone going to be? Because it's not going to be a physical piece of marble or granite or anything like that. So it took several weeks, and I take walks twice a day, morning and evening, and they're very important to me. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to think and feel and what had been important to me in life, and what did I do with my life, and what did I feel what I'm about, and stuff like that. And so after a certain period of time, I came up with a 20-word summary who I see myself as being, what I see myself as being. And if I was going to have a tombstone, perhaps this would be the epitaph that would be chiseled into the stone. But, and I wanted it 20 words to be sort of equivalent to what I would put on a tombstone if I was going to have one. But I'm not going to have one. So, but I came up with the 20 words anyway. And the 20 words the phrase I came up with to describe myself is to feel situations I'm in and to bring my energies to make the situations richer for the people they touch. So that's how I see myself. It's very feeling oriented, to feel my surroundings and bring my energies, not do something specific, physically have a house worth $1 million, I don't know what, to bring my energies to make the situations richer for the people they touch. So that was my tombstone. And again, here we go flowing along. And as soon as I did that, I said, wait a second. This took me several weeks to come up with. I came up with what I feel is a definition. Well, then it's not any longer a tombstone, it's a life stone. I've defined who I am. Well, that becomes a beacon for how I should live my life going forward. That's what I'm about. That's my life. So instead of just thinking of it an epitaph on a tombstone that sits there. It becomes my life and what I'm about, and a guide for how what I should be doing, and how I can go forward, how I should go forward because of who I am. So again, that was it. Just flowed along, and it keeps flowing, and it's gonna. Let's keep going through these steps, and the steps are gonna go through the remainder of uh, my life, so to speak, until I die. But also, as we'll see in a moment, it's going to continue flowing after I'm dead. My living, dying, grieving, remembering flow is going to continue after I go past that point of actually being physically dead. So let's keep going along this. And because I had my tombstone, and there was this other balance of living and dying, so I felt dying coming along, and a natural feeling is grieving. So I started feeling that I was grieving. Grieving, maybe it's partly fear, like the poem we read at the beginning. It's clearly grieving is I'm losing things. I'm losing things that have been me up to now, not only my memory, but I'm in the process of losing my ability to relate to the world because my, my memory is certainly less. I don't remember people. I wasn't remembering people, wasn't remembering activities, and I am declining, disintegrating. That's going on. So there's a certain amount of grieving going on at the same time that living is going on. I'm still living, but grieving is being part of what I'm about. But it's a different grieving than, say, heaven forbid, after somebody dies, then the people around them grieves because they're gone. I'm grieving and I'm still alive. I'm still living. So that allows my grieving to be different. One, I'm grieving for myself. I'm not grieving for somebody else. So what do I do when I'm grieving about myself? I feel it, and I can even talk about it, and I can talk about it with people around me. I'm starting to grieve for myself because I am seeing my dying coming along. And this is how I'm feeling about it. And this is what I would ask for you or be able to talk with you about. Grieving became a very living thing. And it was happening before I died. And I feel like that bringing up grieving before I'm dead also carries along how I'm going to be after I'm dead, but also with the people around me. They're going to start their grieving in a different way, not sad and tears and stuff like that. But okay, this is part of the natural flow, like the river flowing into the ocean. Living flows to dying, which flows to grieving. And also because I'm still living, I, well, I may be grieving, but I'm not giving up the ship, so to speak. And I thought, wait a second, I'm grieving because I'm losing things, but I'm losing things is opening up parts of me that weren't here before. I'm forgetting things, but that opens up other things that are around me. So I felt like it was what I called grief growth. I am grieving, but I'm not using it just to be sad. I wouldn't say using it. It's not just bringing sadness. I'm forgetting about a lot of things, but on the other hand, I'm freed up. And I even feel, and there's a lot of strange and surrealistic things that are going on in my life. One of them is that dementia is a form of release. And I've started using the word noise. Dementia allows me to identify noise in my life versus what I consider really who I am and what I'm about. And dementia allows me to keep noise away. So as I'm keeping noise away, that's leaving an open space for me. And so that's what I call grief growth. So again, grieving is here, but it's not just being sad. When I'm talking about grieving, I talk about grieving for myself, and I also talk about, wow, I'm grieving, and I had never thought of this before or that before or done this or that. And I measured how connected it is with me. And so I've started filling in my life with other things that I wouldn't have thought about before, but which are new, are a form of growth. So those are part of the grieving at this stage. Before I die, I'm doing these kind of things and I'm talking about them with the people around me. And again, not talking full time. We're not talking not in the right places, but lightly and in situations where I feel it's appropriate, I can raise, wow, I'm going through this process of living and dying and grieving and describe it, which makes it part of the flow. So then the day will come and I feel it's not going to be so long from now when I will die. I will be dead. And so that is the definition of death is going from life over to death. So that's dying. So that's going to happen. And there will be after that the blackness of grief. There is there is nothing else. Somebody dies or some other hard thing happens. It could even be losing a pet, losing a job, moving to a new place. There's a lot of losses that can cause grief. And so right after that, just like I felt grief when I got the word dementia, in many, many, many situations in life, there's a hit and a level of grief that's almost unbearable, and people relate to it in different ways. So the grieving, the way I'm flowing with it is I've started the grieving before I'm dead. And after that period, or as part of that period of severe response to say my having passed away, there will be a grief. But I can keep flowing beyond that. There's remembering. And as I'm feeling this flow from living, dying, grieving, and remembering, I feel differently about remembering. Yes, I created my tombstone. And yes, my tombstone, whatever it'll be, has the 20-word epitaph. But that is chiseled. Those 20 words are chiseled into a stone and they have no movement. They don't change. They aren't intended to change. They're exactly uh, meant to be set. And as I'm feeling my process and what my grieving is going to feel like for the people who are doing grieving afterwards, I feel about the 20-word thing I came up with. I said, no, I don't want an epitaph, something that sits chiseled in the stone. What I envision is epitaphing. Epitaphing, not to get linguistic, it's a verb. It's doing. It is epitaphing. That's how I feel, how I want my being to keep flowing. I'm already dead at that point, but I envision epitaphing. And epitaphing says it's a way of remembering. I envision as being a form of remembering. And what it does is it takes something that a person valued, that was important for a person, and of the deceased. A mourner or somebody who's remembering somebody else thinks about the deceased, thinks about what they know of their life and what was important, and picks up a small piece of the deceased's life. And in whatever way the mourner, the rememberer feels appropriate, they do it. They do in some form what the deceased person valued and liked. And that is a way of remembering. it's not just remembering in mind. It is an active form of remembering. And I'll bring my brother as an example of epitaphing. My brother passed away, and my brother was a gardener. He liked plants. He did a lot with plants. He talked about plants, uh, flowers, and landscaping, these kind of things. So my brother passed away, and we're going through the process. And I felt like I wanted to do epitaphing for him. So I thought of what was important to him was the gardening, was the plants. So what I've started doing is as wherever I am, as I'm walking along, if I see a plant that attracts my attention, a flower that is particularly pretty, a cactus. Around here, there's some cactuses that really strikes me. What I'll do is not just that seeing it uh, reminds me of my brother. What I do is, in order to do epitaphing, I go over to the plant, I go over to the flower, and I touch it. I touch it or lightly stroke it, of course, not to do any damage at all to it, but to connect with it actively. And for me, that's here. I get a little quite emotional quite easily, so I'm getting a little emotional. That's my way of epitaphing my brother. I do something actively that I do something actively that he valued. And in a way, and I want to be careful with the word because it could be misunderstood. That's my way of keeping one part of my brother alive. Uh, He's not reincarnated or something like that, but it's a way I have what I feel like epitaphing is keeping a part of the deceased person alive in some way. And for everybody, every mourner, every person who's remembering, and every deceased person, what epitaphing is and how it's done and how often it's done and what form, that'll be up to the person who's doing the remembering to decide and how they want to do the epitaphing. And so that is even bringing the flow further. So now we've gone through living, dying, grieving, and remembering, and we've seen that it's all a flow. It's not one after another. So it all comes together. For example, even with this epitaphing, when I wrote, in this case, I wrote an epitaph for myself, but it's not needed for epitaphing. But when I was talking to somebody, I said, this is what I came up with, what I'm about, and I'm going to be cremated, and I'm not going to have stones on a tombstone. And they said, well, they have the tradition when they go visit a tombstone to put a little stone on top of it. That's there when they visit a tombstone. It's a sign of remembrance to put a little stone on top of the tombstone. And what are they going to be able to do if I'm cremated and don't have a tombstone? So it fit together so well. So I said, epitaphing, please do epitaphing. If and whenever, whatever circumstance you want to remember me or choose to remember me, what's important to me is go and as I had written, just feel a situation and bring some energy to make it richer for the people involved. So come, be in some situation, look around. What can I do? Very small, but what can I do to bring positive energy to the situation? And for me, that's epitaphing. That's you know what? I feel this very much. The early part of this process, I can be more fulfilled. Even when I'm living, going into dying, knowing that this I've said, or perhaps even without me saying, somebody will be epitaphing by realizing something that's important to me, and they will be doing it. That gives me a lot of fulfillment. That's knowing that that's what's going to happen as part of this flowing process, even back here where I am now, and even earlier. That fulfills me in quite a bit. I'm very satisfied with that. So that's this flow, just what we've been talking about since the very beginning. And what I'm trying to express is knowing that that's the end of the flow is making how I feel earlier in the flow much fuller, much much more satisfactory. And so that's going to affect how I relate to everything that's going on. And I'll say, don't get me wrong, dementia is horrible. And even with this feeling, things happened. And as I'm sitting here today, one of them happened yesterday, where the horrible ugliness of dementia overwhelms me. So when I'm talking about this flow, I'm not saying, well, everything is, pretty and nice. There are the realities of life and the realities of what a person is that happen. But looking at this as a flow has made a big difference for me, and I think is actually like the river flowing to the sea, to the ocean. It's the way life is, and it's how I prefer to look at it, and I feel that it's not weird, or it's actually what is going on in life. So that is the flow uh, of living, dying, grieving, and remembering, looked at in a different way than what we might be looking at. Now I'm living. Well, then I'm going to die and I'm going to be dead, and people will be sad, and maybe somebody will remember me or not. So I'm just restating the purpose of this conversation is I hope that somehow there's a feeling of the difference between flowing, looking at these real life things, than just thinking about the one I'm in right now or the one I'm going to be in shortly and only relating to that. So to close, again with thanks to Jennifer, I'm just going to read the Khalil Gibran poem again, and it's a good summary. It was a good way of expressing what is going to be in this conversation, and now it's a good way to express what has been in this conversation. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Great. I hope this has been able to give some sense of how we can flow with these life events. Thank you so much.